An early voting came to an end in the U.S. states of Indiana and Illinois amid a high voter turnout in the midterm polls. The elections are widely seen as a litmus test for President Donald Trump's government. Campaigning closed as opinion polls predicted a neck-to-neck finish between the Democrats and Republicans. Control of both chambers of the United States Congress and 36 governors' offices are up for grabs in the crucial polls. While opinion polls have showed that while the Democrats would get a majority in the House of Representatives, the Republicans would retain their control over the Senate. In one of his final campaigns, President Donald Trump sharpened his rhetoric against migrants.
Think we're letting that caravan come into this country? You can forget it. But the Democrats want to abolish ICE. They want America to be a giant sanctuary city for drug dealers, predators, and bloodthirsty MS-13 killers. Republicans believe America should be a sanctuary for law-abiding Americans, not criminal aliens. Tuesday is your chance to send a message to the Democrat mob and to everyone who has made it their mission to denigrate our movement and to divide our great nation. It's not going to happen. Tomorrow, with your votes, you can stop the radical resistance in its tracks. I look forward to seeing what happens because something is going on. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Right?
And joining us live this morning on the program is our correspondent from Washington, D.C., Harry Horton. Harry, why are these elections significant? How do you explain its importance in terms of domestic U.S. politics is concerned?
Well, look, they're hugely important. This is the first chance that US voters will have nationally to cast their opinion on President Donald Trump. And although Donald Trump isn't on the ballot in these elections, make no doubt about it, these elections are all about him. He's put himself front and centre of this midterm election campaign. He's been saying at those rallies, as you've just heard, he's been saying, imagine I'm on the ballot. So this is a referendum on his presidency so far. If the Democrats can take back control of at least one chamber of Congress, that will mean that President Trump will find it a lot more difficult to get things done over the next 2 years. Much of his legislation won't be able to pass through Congress with some Democratic opposition, and it will mean that the Democrats have some power for the first time under President Donald Trump. That will mean they can launch investigations into things that his White House is doing. They can launch investigations into members of his cabinet, and all of that will require extra work from the Trump administration, and that will slow down anything that they're wanting to do. So really, it will make, if the Democrats can win back some power, it will make Donald Trump's next 2 years a lot more difficult.
Right, and as you pointed out, President Trump is putting up a brave face there, but he faces a real test despite having managed to polarize the electorate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a real test for him. I mean, we've heard just in those clips there him returning to the themes that won him the election in 2016, themes like immigration and security, for example. You know, he's painted a dark picture of what would happen if the Democrats took back some power in the United States. So there's a real test, really, about whether 2 years on from that shock election victory he had in 2016, whether American voters are still prepared to buy into that vision, or whether voters really, or at least some voters, have had enough, and whether the Democrats can manage to get enough of those voters to try and win back some power. If they do win back some power, that will give them real confidence heading into the 2020 election in 2 years' time.
Right, and there's been good turnout among early voters. What does that indicate?
Well, it indicates that people are pretty fired up for this election on both sides of the aisle. Certainly Democrats have been incredibly energised over the past 2 years, whether it's women who have been particularly outraged by some of Donald Trump's comments, or energised by the Me Too movement as well, whether it's minority voters who feel that Donald Trump's policies are disproportionately affecting them, whether it's young people who feel incredibly put off by the Trump administration. And then on the other side, Republicans, there's lots of evidence to suggest that in the past few weeks they've become incredibly energised as well. These speeches that President Trump has been making about immigration, there's lots of evidence to suggest that that's motivated some of his voters who might have otherwise stayed away from the polls. So we're expecting the turnout to be pretty high. Many commentators here in Washington, D.C., and indeed many strategists for both parties have been labelling these elections as the biggest midterm elections ever. So there's a lot of pressure on both parties to try and deliver some sort of result.
All right. Thank you there, Harry Horton, for joining us from Washington, D.C. and getting us all the updates.